forest has always been a place of mystery, a landscape woven with shadows and secrets. For centuries, it has held an almost primal power over the human imagination, embodying the unknown and the untamed. The whisper of the wind through dense canopies, the rustling of leaves underfoot, and the faint echoes of unseen creatures make the forest feel alive and aware, as if it possesses an ancient memory older than any human presence. There is a sense of being watched, an unsettling awareness that you may not be alone. But what is it about forests that awakens such profound and timeless fear? Perhaps it is the isolation, the sensation of being far from human civilization, surrounded by towering trees and veiled in a labyrinthine landscape that distorts all sense of direction. Or perhaps it is the darkness, an almost physical presence that seeps through the thick layers of vegetation, casting everything into shadows where the line between reality and imagination blurs. In this video, we'll delve into 4 stories of supernatural encounters in the forest, each one taking us closer to the unexplained and the unknowable. These are tales not simply of strange noises or fleeting shadows, but of encounters that defy logic and linger long in the minds of those who experienced them. They are stories of spirits, of figures from another time, of voices that echo from beyond, and of creatures that seem woven from the very darkness of the woods. Join us as we enter this realm, where the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural dissolve, and the forest reveals its hidden mysteries. Be prepared, for these tales may stay with you, haunting you like the whisper of the trees long after the video ends. Forests are more than just collections of trees. They are worlds within themselves, layered with history, myth, and an almost palpable presence. For countless generations, cultures around the globe have told stories of supernatural encounters rooted in the dense, mysterious heart of the forest. It is a place that holds remnants of the past and whispers of other realms, an expanse of wilderness where reality can slip into something. In many cultures, forests are considered portals, places where the boundaries between the living and the dead grow thin. From the Celtic tales of enchanted woods to the Japanese legends of haunted forests, the lore surrounding these natural sanctuaries is steeped in an understanding that something beyond human comprehension dwells there. This has led to a near-universal fascination with forests as settings for tales of the supernatural. Whether it's a lone spirit wandering an ancient path, an echoing voice lost in the fog, or a shadowy figure glimpsed through the trees, these stories persist, speaking to our deepest Yet the allure of the forest is not only in the fear it evokes, but also in its mystery. The forest is a place of secrets, hidden clearings, ancient trees, and forgotten trails, all of which invite the mind to wander and wonder. Those who enter it are confronted with a silence so profound it seems alive, an eerie tranquility that hides countless secrets. Each rustling leaf, each unexplained sound hints at something lurking just below. As we journey deeper into these stories, the forest will serve as both a character and a setting. It is a silent observer, a looming presence that seems to watch and listen. The characters in these tales may be alone in the woods, yet they are far from solitary. Something, whether spirit, creature, or force, shares that space with them, making the forest not just a place of nature, but let us move now to the first of these stories, where the forest's silence is broken by the appearance of a figure from another time, a ghostly reminder of the lives once lived among these ancient story one. Encounter with an ancestral apparition. Our first story takes us to the heart of a quiet, old forest, a place rarely visited, nestled far from well-trodden paths. This story revolves around a solitary hiker, a person in search of peace, perhaps, or simply the thrill of exploring the unknown. On an autumn afternoon, as the light began to fade and a cool mist settled over the trees, a hiker found themselves enveloped in an atmosphere thick with mystery. As they walked, a sense of unease began to grow, subtle at first, a chill in the air that didn't match the season, a sudden silence that fell over the forest as birds ceased their calls, as if everything around them had paused, waiting. But the hiker pushed on, determined to complete their trail. It was only then, just as the last light was fading, that they saw it. A figure standing in the distance, partially hidden among the trees. The figure was unlike anything the hiker had expected to see, dressed in clothing that seemed oddly outdated, long, flowing garments, covered in what appeared to be fine embroidery, something from a different era entirely. It stood there, motionless, facing away. For a moment, the hiker assumed it must be another person, perhaps a local who knew these woods better than anyone else. Yet, as they tried to focus, it became evident that something was wrong. The figure was translucent, a faint outline blurred by the mist, its edges flickering like a candle in the wind. The hiker froze, their heart pounding as a primal instinct warned them not to go closer. And yet, unable to resist, they took a step forward, and then another. The figure began to turn, slowly, its face still shadowed by the dimming light. Just as it was about to reveal itself fully, a sudden gust of wind tore through the forest, scattering leaves and snapping branches. In that split second, the apparition vanished, leaving nothing but silence in its place. Shaken but curious, the hiker searched the area, hoping to find some sign that would explain what they had seen. But the ground was untouched, no footsteps in the soft earth, no trace of anyone having been there. Alone again in the silent forest, they could feel the weight of an invisible presence, as if the very trees were holding their breath, guarding the secrets of the past. Days later, still haunted by the encounter, the hiker researched the area and learned of a tragic story associated with the forest. Centuries ago, it had been home to a small settlement. A place abandoned after a mysterious illness claimed the lives of many of its inhabitants. Local folklore spoke of a woman who had lost her entire family to the disease, a figure known to roam the woods in mourning, unable to leave the place where her loved ones rested. The hiker couldn't shake the feeling that they had glimpsed her spirit, a soul forever tethered to that forest, replaying a moment lost to time. Though they tried to rationalize it as an illusion born of exhaustion and mist, a part of them remained unconvinced, haunted by the memory of that silent, unearthly figure. This encounter lingered in their mind, changing the way they saw the forest. What had once been a simple, tranquil place of natural beauty now seemed laden with layers of the past, hiding lives and stories that had long since faded. For them, the forest had become a place where time and reality blurred, and where those who ventured too deep might come face to face with echoes of a forgotten history. This is only the beginning of our journey into the unknown. Now, we move on to another tale, a story of voices calling from the mist, luring those who wander too far. A story that reveals the forest's power, not just to show, but to deceive. Story 2, The Voice Calling from the Mist. Our second story follows a group of friends who set out for a weekend camping trip deep within the forest. They were seasoned hikers, accustomed to long nights under the stars and the quiet solitude of nature. This trip, however, would leave them with memories they would never forget, a haunting reminder of how the forest can turn from tranquil to terrifying in the blink of an eye. It was late in the evening when the strange events began. The group had set up camp in a small clearing, the fire casting warm light and shadows that flickered on the surrounding trees. As the conversation drifted and laughter filled the air, a thick mist began to creep into the campsite, curling around their feet and swallowing the forest floor. This mist was different, dense and unnatural, swallowing up the warmth of the fire and muffling the usual sounds of the forest. Suddenly, one of the friends, Lisa, froze mid-sentence. She gestured for everyone to be silent, straining to listen to something distant. At first they heard nothing, just the faint crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of leaves. But then, through the stillness, came a voice, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper calling Lisa's name from within the mist. The friends looked at each other in confusion. They were alone, miles from any other campsite, with no signal and no way for anyone else to know they were there. Despite their shared unease, curiosity got the better of them. And Lisa, against the protests of her friends, took a few steps toward the direction of the voice. The closer she got, the clearer it became. A voice that sounded strangely familiar, yet distant and warped, as though echoing from some faraway place. As Lisa moved further into the mist, her friends called for her to come back, but she was entranced, unable to pull herself away. The voice continued, shifting between softness and clarity, calling her by name in a tone that was both welcoming and chilling. She followed it deeper into the forest, the mist thickening, wrapping around her like a shroud. She felt as though she were moving through a dream, barely aware of her friend's desperate calls fading into the background. Finally, as the voice grew louder, almost beckoning her forward, Lisa stopped. Something inside her warned of danger, an instinct that snapped her out of the trance. She turned to see her friends' frantic faces just visible through the mist, their voices finally breaking through the fog. With a sudden sense of terror, she rushed back toward them, her heart racing as the voice continued to call her name, growing softer, fading back into the depths of the mist. Once safely back with her friends, they all huddled close, the air tense and heavy with unspoken fear. They listened in silence, straining for any other sounds. But the forest was once again silent, as if the voice had never existed. For the rest of the night, none of them dared venture away from the fire, haunted by the memory of that disembodied voice and the unexplainable lure it had on Lisa. The group left the forest the next morning, their camping trip cut short by the encounter. Each of them left with a lingering question. What had they heard? Was it a spirit, a trick of the mist, or something darker? Something that preyed on their vulnerability? They would never know for sure, but the forest had left its mark, a shadow that would follow them long after they left its depths. Now, as we move on, the mystery deepens. In the next tale, we explore an encounter with a shadowy presence, a creature that seems woven from the very fabric of the forest darkness, something that waits and watches in the shadows. Story 3. The Creature in the Shadows. Our third story centers around a park ranger named Tom, a seasoned outdoorsman who spent years patrolling the trails and keeping an eye on the wildlife. He was familiar with the forest in all its moods, its stillness, its life, its dangers. But one night, during a routine patrol, he encountered something that shook his confidence, something he would later struggle to explain, even to himself. It was a dark, moonless night, and Tom was walking a remote trail, checking for signs of trespassers or stray animals. The forest around him was unnervingly silent, the usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves oddly absent. As he moved deeper into the woods, his torchlight illuminating only a few feet ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if a presence lurked just out of sight, concealed by the darkness. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of movement. A dark, shadowy figure slipping between the trees. Tom stopped, shining his torch in the direction of the movement, but there was nothing there, only an empty stretch of forest shrouded in shadow. He brushed it off as an animal, or perhaps a trick of the light, and continued his patrol, but the unease lingered, tightening like a knot in his stomach. A few minutes later he saw it again. This time, it was closer. A vague, hulking form barely visible in the edge of his light. It seemed to melt into the shadows, as though it was part of the darkness itself, watching him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. Tom's instincts screamed at him to leave, but curiosity got the better of him. He took a few cautious steps forward, his torchlight focused on the spot where he'd last seen the figure. Suddenly, there was a soft rustling sound, and the creature seemed to glide backward, slipping behind a tree and disappearing into the shadows once more. Tom's heart raced as he realized that whatever it was playing with him, following him, yet staying just out of reach. He tried to rationalize it, thinking it might be a large animal, but its movements were too deliberate, too intelligent. There was a knowing quality to the way it stayed hidden, just beyond his reach, as if it was studying him. The feeling of being prey struck him. Tom decided to turn back. walking swiftly but carefully, all the while resisting the urge to look over his shoulder. But the creature did not leave him alone. He could feel its presence, keeping pace with him, just far enough to remain unseen, but close enough for him to sense its gaze on his back. Finally, as he neared the edge of the forest, he risked a glance over his shoulder. In the dim light, he caught one last glimpse of the creature. A tall, dark figure standing in the shadows, its form almost blending with the trees, as if it were part of the forest itself. It watched him, unmoving, as he crossed the boundary out of the woods. Tom never returned to that part of the forest alone. He would later describe the creature to his colleagues as a shadow that seemed to live and breathe, something that wasn't animal nor human. To this day, he wonders what might have happened if he had stayed or ventured closer, but he knows that some questions are better left unanswered. Next, we turn to the final story, a tale of a lost traveller who stumbles upon a strange, ghostly village hidden within the trees, a place where time and reality seem to unravel. Story 4, The Lost Path and the Phantom Village. Our final story follows a young traveller, Mark, who had set out to explore a dense, unfamiliar forest far from his usual routes. He was experienced in navigating woodland trails, accustomed to finding his way even in remote areas. But on this day, as dusk began to fall, he realized with a chill that he had strayed from the main path. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't find his way back. The trees seemed to close in around him, their shadows lengthening, transforming the forest into a maze of darkness. Just as panic began to set in, Mark noticed something strange through the trees. A faint, warm glow flickering in the distance. Relieved at the prospect of finding shelter, he moved toward it, carefully picking his way through the underbrush. As he drew closer, he saw what looked like a small village nestled in a hollow surrounded by towering trees. There were old wooden cabins, their windows glowing softly with light, and narrow paths winding between them. Yet something about the village felt wrong. The structures looked ancient, almost decayed, yet the lights were unmistakably real, flickering as though from candles or lanterns. Mark approached cautiously, calling out to see if anyone would respond, but the place was deathly silent. He stepped onto the path that led between the cabins, looking around for any signs of life, yet feeling a strange emptiness as if the village itself were holding its breath. As he walked deeper into the village, he saw shadows moving inside the cabins, figures standing by the windows, faces he couldn't quite make out watching him with a silent intensity. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that every time he looked away, the shadows seemed to shift, moving closer to the doors and windows, as if they were slowly approaching him. Trying to ignore the creeping dread, Mark peered through the window of one of the cabins. Inside, he saw what looked like an old table set for dinner, dust-covered plates and glasses arranged as if someone had once lived there but left in a hurry. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed a figure standing in the doorway of the next cabin, a tall, dark silhouette with hollow eyes fixed directly on him. Frozen with fear, Mark backed away, feeling as though he were being watched from every direction. Just as he was about to turn and run, he heard a faint whisper, almost like a collective murmur from the cabins, a sound that seemed to resonate from every corner of the village. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the trees, filling the air with an unnatural tension, a sound that Mark felt more than heard. In a panic, he turned and ran back into the forest, his heart pounding as he fled from the eerie silence that followed him. He glanced back only once, seeing the village shrouded in mist, its lights flickering as if bidding him farewell, or warning him not to return. When he finally made it back to a familiar path, Mark stopped to catch his breath, but the eerie memory of the village lingered. Later, he would ask locals about it, hoping for some rational explanation, but no one knew of any village in that part of the forest. It was as though the place had never existed. Some whispered that he had encountered a phantom village, a relic from a time long past, trapped in a liminal space where only the lost could find it. With this final tale, we reach the end of our journey into the forest's secrets. But, as these stories have shown, The forest is a place where reality blurs and where those who wander may come face to face with mysteries that defy understanding. As we draw our journey to a close, one thing becomes clear. The forest is not merely a backdrop for these stories. It is an active participant, a presence as haunting as the spirits and figures that move within it. Each tale reveals a different side of the forest, sometimes a portal to forgotten lives, other times a place of hidden dangers that watch from the shadows. But more than anything, the forest represents the unknown, that vast, uncharted part of life where reality ends and mystery begins. Why are we drawn to stories like these? Perhaps it's because they allow us to explore our fears safely, from the comfort of our screens, while still experiencing the thrill of the unknown. In a world where so much is explained and categorized, the supernatural remains one of the few realms left untouched by reason. The forest, with its ancient trees and dark paths, offers a place where we can feel small, where we can confront what we don't understand and accept that some questions may never have answers. These tales remind us that there is a part of our minds, an ancestral part, that still believes in the spirits of the forest, in the whispers of lost souls and creatures that dwell beyond our understanding. Perhaps it is this part that compels us to return to such stories, time and again, to feel a sense of wonder and trepidation, a reminder of a world filled with things beyond our grasp. But as we leave the forest, these stories linger, shadows that follow us home. They leave us with a question, one that only the bravest among us might attempt to answer. What would you do if you found yourself alone in the forest and felt the gaze of something unseen, watching from the depths? Would you continue forward, curious to uncover the truth, or would you turn back, letting the mystery remain? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. The forest keeps its secrets well, but sometimes, just sometimes, it allows us a fleeting glimpse. Until next time, remember, the forest may be silent, but it is never truly empty. As our exploration of these haunting tales draws to a close, we invite you to take a moment to consider the mysteries we've encountered together. These stories reveal that the forest is more than just trees and trails. It's a threshold, a place where the ordinary world fades, and something far older and less understood takes its place. Whether it's ghostly figures, strange voices, or shadowy creatures, if these stories resonated with you, if they stirred that blend of fear and fascination that only tales of the supernatural can bring, we encourage you to share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt something inexplicable, a presence or a whisper that defied logic? Perhaps your own encounter awaits somewhere, in a hidden corner of a dark forest, ready to leave its mark. Your curiosity, your willingness to engage with the unknown, is what keeps these tales alive. By sharing and reflecting on them, we breathe life into the mysteries that lurk just beyond our understanding. So if you're intrigued, if you felt that pull toward the uncanny, share your story below, or tell us which tale left the deepest impression. And if you're brave enough, consider venturing into a forest of your own one day, with an open mind and a listening ear. Who knows? Remember to like this video if you enjoyed the journey, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that delve into the eerie and unexplained. Each forest, each shadow, and each unexplored path holds a story, waiting for someone to discover. So join us again soon as we continue to explore these realms of mystery and wonder. Thank you for being a part of this journey. And as always, tread carefully. The forest may seem silent, but as we've learned, it's a silence full of secrets, and you never know what might be watching from the shadows.